Ladies and gents, it's the Two Ordinary Cops Halloween edition. How are you, Schultzy?
Good mate, good mate. Isn't Halloween a bloody American thing?
Yeah, but I lived in Alice Springs, mate. There's a massive American population there, and they loved it. So, yeah. As a result, my kids are kind of into it a bit. And whatever, I don't care. It's all good fun. So,
Who's going to
how are
trick
you,
or
bud?
treat to your house? Sorry, mate. Who's going to
Hey,
trick
I
or
missed
treat to
that.
your
Say,
house?
yeah, trick or treat. No, yeah, nobody. A couple of cows. That's about it. Yeah, no. What's been happening, Schultzy?
Well, mate, we've got quite a few people, especially a lot of regulars, get in contact with us, and so thank you very much. But we've got a few new ones as well. Well, one of the regular ones actually is Ollie. I think he's South Australia, and he actually sent through a photo in his patrol car, listening to us, mate.
Yeah, you sent the picture through, and no, mate, we're very much appreciative. Love the fact my civilian podcasting hat says thanks very much. I'll put my old sergeant stripes back on for a minute. Two things: if you're driving through a city street or a town, turn the podcast off, on the windows down, and patrol the streets. Ollie, I'm mucking with you, mate. We love your work. We love your work. But the other thing was, it's definitely a police car because there's dust and fingerprints all over the screen. I love it. They're all the same. Police cars everywhere are exactly the same. You get into it and it's a dust bowl. They're just a bloody, they're like an industrial hazard, all of them, because they're just the way you get to the jobs. And it's funny, it's it's funny how I looked at that screen and went, "Oh my god, it's definitely a police car."
Yeah.
It's just oh, Alice Springs was funny, mate. Those police cars used to get so full of crap, it wasn't funny. And yeah,
Yeah.
I remember commenting on a Facebook. Someone had said, "Oh, what modifications are done to the vehicles?" And anyway, everyone's going, "Oh, nothing really. They're all pretty standard." And I said, "NT Police here. Yeah, they're stock standard, mate. The only chips in our cars are the ones from Macca's that fell down between the seats." So yeah, that's about
Oh
that's about
dear.
the only modifications that happen to those cars. So yeah, no, good on
Yeah.
you, Ollie. Thank you very much, mate. Keep it up. We
Yep.
love it.
And
Spread it around. Get everyone
yeah,
listening to it.
yeah, exactly. He actually said also he liked your comment about, it's a tragedy, but it's not my tragedy. So
Oh, that's right. You said he went to a fatal. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Look,
yep.
that's I don't think that was my term. I think someone else said that to me when I was fairly junior,
Yeah.
and I said, "Oh, mate, there's definitely a tragedy, but it's not our tragedy, and it's just a survival mechanism."
Yep. Yeah,
Oh
definitely.
yeah,
Mate, and we've had another one from Dan. Now, Dan, I think from memory, I'm just trying to look through, but I think he was Vicpol. Yeah, he got in contact with us and basically mentioned if sometime we could talk about, especially brothers or sisters, I suppose, we've lost along the way, to suicide and all that sort of thing. So,
yeah.
um, because he's been in the cops for 22 years, but he also liked your definition of the twisted ankle PTSD.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. Getting a bit of play on that because I know I just wanted to put it in a term that people could relate to, and yeah, it's like you relate mental injury to physical injury, and then people will understand because everyone's cut himself or hurt himself in some way, and yeah, that's the way I sort of relate to that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. Now, mate, I'm just going to do a quick one I didn't mention to you before, but Damo Doug's, mate, I believe you're actually in the Gold Coast at the moment and willing to buy us beers. However, I don't think I'll get back to you, but I'll message you shortly. I do apologise, but I've just been, mate, I have been so busy, it is not funny. And it might be a bit of a long drive for you, Damo.
oh, but mate, I do like a beverage, so yeah, we'll see. I'll be up there at some point. Oh, that'll be good actually. I'd love, what would be funny would record a podcast with someone while we're having a
Well,
beer. That'd be good. Yeah.
well, yeah, exactly. The only problem is, mate, he's only there for about 2 more days. So,
Yeah, no, gonna struggle. We're gonna struggle.
yeah, yeah. Now,
Yeah.
now, Damo, mate, the last shout out I'm going to do for someone who actually rang me up on Saturday, in fact, as I was bloody nuts in helping in politics, but Ray Musgrave.
Oh my god. What that man is he's like the never ending. figure in the Northern Territory. He's been there longer than just about everybody else. I think he's been there 10 years longer than the commissioner.
Yeah. Yep.
And the commissioner's been there a long time. He's been there forever. I don't know if that's accurate, but it would be pretty close. He'd be getting close to one of the longest serving members in the Northern Territory Police. Current serving, I mean. Is he
Oh,
current serving?
definitely. Yeah.
Is he still in?
Yeah, yeah, he's still serving. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
incredible! Yeah. Oh, that
He
bloke is it. Yeah.
and he started listening to him, so he gave me a call. He really likes him. Um, and mate, I think, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he joined as a cadet when he was 16. So,
Yeah, that'll be right. I remember that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and he must be
um,
223 years old now, so that's a hell of a long time to be in the police force. Oh, yeah. Well done, Ray. No, I
yeah,
love that bloke. He's a legend. He's just a weapon, that fella.
he
Yeah.
is. Oh,
You know
mate,
you
yeah,
know
mate.
what? There's two people in the Northern Territory Police who, the only way I could sum it up is that never before has a human being enjoyed, illicit substances so much without actually consuming them.
And I know who the other one is.
And I'll shout him out too. He's a very quiet fella, but he's an absolute legend of, especially drug enforcement, is Kenny Bradshaw. And
Yep.
the other fella who's an absolute weapon in drug enforcement and illicit substance enforcement is Ray Musgrave, especially in very, very remote places,
Yep.
to the point where he'd sit on a roadblock on his own time for hours and hours and hours and wouldn't claim overtime unless he got an arrest. Just an
Yeah.
absolute weapon.
He
So,
is, mate. I actually said years ago what they should have done with Ray Musgrave, and I'm sure there's some grandfather clause that they could have done it. Just give him a car, a swag, and leave him to his own devices.
oh God, yeah, the prisoners will just roll in. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. Well, he's a bachelor. He's no single man. He just hangs around. He loves it. He just gets out in the bush, and yeah, no, just an absolute legend. Yeah,
Yeah,
but you know what, Schultzy? I think
yeah,
you were the one who had to remind me. I was down in Wallerawang last week doing firefighter training with doing the fire camp with forestry, and
yeah,
I'd forgotten that we will talk about drug enforcement this week.
yes.
So the fact that mentioned Ray Musgrave actually segues spectacularly into drug enforcement.
Oh, that is true.
So, do you want to talk about the early days of dabbling in locking up people and dealing with the substance, illicit substance abuse and possession and things like that in the early days? And I can sort of go on. I did a bit of time in drug squad, but that's later down the track. What are your thoughts,
Yeah,
mate?
yeah. Well, mate, I was pretty lucky, because Kenny Bradshaw, who you mentioned, was an absolute legend. What he's forgotten about drugs is not worth knowing about.
Mm,
He lived around the clock, Kenny did, and yeah, just an absolute legend when it came to drug enforcement. But I was when I was working that TAC team, which I've mentioned in previous episodes. I got the ability to work alongside him because he would get us to help him out on a lot of drug busts and all that sort of thing. And it really, I suppose I sharpened my teeth into how to deal with drugs and all that sort of stuff. I mean, oh, actually, mate, there is a photo. I think you must have come to help out sometime in that time because there's a photo of you and I with a shitload of Kava we seized. Do you
yeah,
remember
I remember
that?
the photo. Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a picture that should have been broadcast on the radio. It's a shocker. We've got these really stern looks like we're really angry about it, and we kind of weren't. We just had a really big day out, and hey, come on, fellas, look serious, and we look all stern and yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, that
because
was
I think
Kava.
that one. Sorry, you go.
No, you go, keep going. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. So and I can't remember where that seizure actually came from. I don't know, but you might have been working in crime at the time, and we might be doing a bit of a stint because I thought we seized that with Dingle. And mate, I remember pulling up this car, and I think it was about oh no, I'm just running this off the top of my head. It's a long time ago, so please forgive me. It's probably, yeah, what would it be, 15 years ago now.
Mm.
Um, and I think we seized like 120 kilos of kava at
Yeah,
that
that's not
night, and
unusual.
there's a
Yep.
photo of, yeah, there's a photo of you and I looking over it, and I remember arresting the Tongan that was actually carrying it, and his legs were the size of tree trunks. I'm so glad they were compliant, those people, when we dealt with them, because they were just machines
Just monsters.
of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and look, I know a lot of people listening, especially not from the Northern Territory, and especially the top end, not from the top end, will be going Kava. What? So we kind of
Mm,
have to put this in a territory context. Unfortunately, a lot of these remote communities, when we talk about illicit substance abuse, we're not talking about meth, heroin, cocaine. That they just don't really happen out there. I think, unfortunately, a little bit of meth is starting to sneak into those communities,
yep,
but certainly not to a high level. The biggest problematic substances in these communities, the absolute number one by just a massive factor, is alcohol. Um, Alcohol, and look, we all. I love alcohol. You love alcohol. I don't love the abuse of alcohol, but I certainly I enjoy a beer at the end of the day. I think we've already spoken about how we think having a few beers after a traumatic thing is a good thing to break the ice and all that sort of thing. Alcohol in some of these remote Aboriginal communities causes no end of disaster. So as a result, it's treated very much like an illicit substance. And the unit that was developed basically about the time that we joined the police, around the time of the intervention, was the Substance Abuse Intelligence Desk. And the primary goal of that was to target those sort of things in and out of those specialising in remote community stuff. So moving on to Kava, alcohol causes a lot of violence, domestic violence. As we know, it causes violence everywhere. People can't handle their grog, shouldn't drink it. Unfortunately, a lot of these Aboriginal communities, that the alcohol abuse is very high, and what it causes is lots and lots of violence. Um, when you speak about Kava doesn't necessarily cause violence, but it causes. I don't like to use the word excessively, but it is catastrophic neglect. If you go to places in the north of Arnhem Land that where this kava really is consumed en masse, um, it causes people to basically do nothing all the time, and it
yep,
causes health problems when they consume it to the level that they do. Like, they just consume it and consume it and consume it. I'll never forget. I saw in Maningrida, the only time I ever saw this kind of thing. I saw a big pack of camp dogs that were quite vicious, probably 10 or 15 dogs roaming in a pack. And in that pack were about 4 or 5 naked children, boys and girls, running with this pack. And they were wild eyed children that just wouldn't come near you. They'd run away when you talked to them, and the dogs would run with them. Basically, these kids live with those camp dogs, and they would find food everywhere they could, and then they'd run away and they'd camp wherever they could. And some had clothes, some didn't. And I remember going, "What is going on there?" And they said, "Oh, that's the Kava kids. Like, they bloody literally live with these packs of dogs because they're so neglected that it's not like they're abused; they're just neglected. These guys get in these Kava induced just comas basically, and nobody handles their children. So obviously, people intervene and those kids get taken into care and all the rest of it. But I remember seeing that, and I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe it. I was so used to alcohol abuse in these communities, not Kava. So
yep,
this will be very foreign to a lot of people because Kava is promoted throughout Australia as a bit of um, a replacement for alcohol, for if you just need to wind down, and all the health benefits over alcohol are rattled off. But
yep.
used used to that level and abused to that level, Kava's terrible.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that is. Mate, I'll
but
I'll just cut in a bit there,
yeah,
Damo, if I can. Mate, so basically, Kava was introduced, I believe, by the missionaries back in the day as a substitute alcohol. The issue being was especially with the Aboriginal people, they consume everything, because that's their hunter gatherer sort of way of dealing with stuff.
mm,
So they would like consume it, and there are like consumed to the amount that they consumed it at was also a problem because it destroys your kidneys, and they used to get this what they used to
yeah,
call crocodile skin, the flaking
yes,
skin on the chest. And I remember talking to a number of them because I mean I lived out at Ramangini in Arnhem Land, and I always said if the carver dog came out there, it'd be dragging its ass along the ground because there was carver everywhere out there.
oh yeah,
Um, And yeah, so and I remember like Aboriginals telling, like talking to me and going, "Oh no, I don't touch the stuff," and I can see the crocodile skin. I'm going, well, that's telling a different story. And
Yeah.
if you're doing it to that level, your kidneys are all already starting to really fail. Like
Oh,
once
yeah.
you start getting in, so this is
Well,
yeah, this is
obviously,
and
like Kava, the worldwide understanding of Kava is it's very traditional in Fiji. It's a
yeah,
greeting drink. There's a ceremony around consumption of Kava, and it's treated as a delicacy. Like it's not something that you just drink all day.
yeah,
And unfortunately, that's the way it's treated in um, in remote communities, and that's why. But only in a very specific area. It's only really prevalent in that
yeah.
northeastern Arnhem Land country. Like it's not anywhere else. Well, I never saw
No,
carver in the desert.
no.
We saw a tiny bit in Catherine, but most of that was going through to go out to Arnhem Land. So
Yeah, it was.
it's
Yeah,
only up
well,
there.
I think that. Sorry, mate. That's. I think that's because a lot of the missionaries were actually out in that area, and so that's where it really became prevalent.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, you're dead right. Basically, you go anywhere else in the territory, and you hardly see it. But also to give people an idea of how much money is in kava. So I think over in Tonga or for even Fiji and all that sort of thing, you can probably buy it for about a cent a gram. Where we
mm,
were, it was $1 a gram. So,
yeah,
that's what's that, 1,000, 100? No, bloody,
$1,000 a kilo.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. So when you imagine Damo and I, that photo I think was 120 kilos.
yeah,
So there's $120,000, and that was just in one lot, one car going up. It was actually going north of Catherine, I think, when we caught it. So,
yeah.
mm,
Yeah, no, it's a massive industry, and the thing is, the penalties weren't very high for it, so it's not a big deal. You get caught, okay, so what? You get a slap on the wrist, and away you go
yeah,
again. Because it's not considered. I mean, there was the Carver Act; it had its whole own act of Parliament that sort of regulated its use because it was not completely unlawful to possess it. There was times where you could.
yep,
But I think we'll move on a little bit. So obviously, people think illicit substances, and they think at the lowest end they're thinking cannabis. Yeah. Well, the thing is, the
yep,
lowest end in the territory wasn't cannabis. The lowest end was the completely legal drug that is alcohol. We've sort of
yep,
spoken, and we talked about how bad that is. The next level up's the kava, and then the cannabis. And mate, you'd agree with me here. Cannabis is everywhere, and it's everywhere
oh,
in
yeah,
the world, but it is all through the territory. And um, it's a funny thing. Cannabis to me is a funny substance. Obviously, like we say, in those little remote communities, it can get consumed. There are people who just wake up in the morning and they start smoking bongs, and they don't stop, and that's just their life. They just smoke cannabis. There is never a point in time where they're not stoned off their head, and that's how it's consumed. So I know very functional, amazing people who are outstanding community members, and they love nothing more than a little chuff of cannabis on a Friday night. It's not my thing. I'm not into it. That's not my thing. But there are people. I love a beer. That's my thing. But I know for a fact there are extremely good people in this world who consume cannabis and just not massively. They just like it to take the edge off or do whatever they need to do. And to me, it was a lower end thing, but I've seen the psychosis from that massive consumption and the anxiety and the paranoia that comes with just
yeah.
absolute total. It's like everything, mate. If you ate mashed potato from the minute you got out of bed in the morning till the minute you went, you would die of diabetes in your teens. Like, yeah, like, it's like anything. Unfortunately, in these communities, consumption is to the extreme. Like me and you will buy a
Yeah,
carton of beer and we'll sit there and we'll have a few beers and we'll poke along.
yeah,
People up there in those communities, they'll buy a carton of beer and they will not stop until it's gone. They will drink it till it's gone, and then they'll
yep,
find more and they'll drink that till it's gone. It's total consumption. So it's
yeah. No, yeah,
yeah,
no, yeah, you're dead right, and that is actually the problem. There's nothing in moderation. Everything is just done to the extreme. So, and yeah, I mean, cannabis. I mean, look, mate, you did actually bring up one story, and I know even officers to a certain extent would always try and allow a little bit through because if you shut it off completely, there has been problems with unrest in the community, and we know one story from Manangredi. We probably won't talk about it much, but that was pretty serious that you investigated.
Yeah, well, that was the stabbing of a police officer in a police station, and basically,
Yeah,
it was retribution by a person who was an extreme consumer of cannabis. He'd formulated in his own head that the police were the enemy, and that the cannabis was his lifeblood, and he needed that. And he was in psychosis, basically. And without identifying the people there, the people who were involved in that are still very much in the job. My role was that we were sent in as quite junior detectives. On it, not even detectives. We were in crime, but not designated. Myself and another bloke off my squad were flown in to investigate that matter, and it was actually very confronting. There was blood all through the muster room of the police station. And like I've said before, the muster room of the police station is your inner sanctum. That is your safe space. And yeah, to see that as a crime scene was pretty full on. But yeah, that was down to just not having cannabis. That was the stressing for ganja, as it's put. They're all just
yeah,
stressing for ganja. That mob, like they haven't got ganja and they're stressing for it. They need ganja. And I tell you, a place that's really bad is Groot Island. And our example there was, and we had a conversation with one of the guys who was based as a general duties copper at Groot at the time. I happened to be in drug squad based out of Catherine, and we just had a planned operation where we were going to go out for 3 days, I think it was, and just hit all their targets. Um, and we basically flew into Groot on the police plane, and all the old grandmothers or all aunties, they're out on the phone. That police plane with that dog's here, that dog's here. Anyway, we had a fella in our crew who was in the Darwin Drug and Organised Crime Squad. He'd come with us, but he'd served for 2 or 3 years in Groot Island, and he briefed us. He said, "We need to get off that plane. We need to get straight in a vehicle, and we are executing the first search warrant immediately. We're not going to the police station. We're going straight to a warrant. So have your ducks in a row, because that's what we're doing. If we don't do that, there's going to be no drugs to seize." And
yeah.
it didn't matter. There still were no drugs to seize. We went straight to our first target, which was meant to be the biggest supplier in Anuragu, which is the main community just outside of the main town that is Aliangula, which is basically the mining town. And yeah, we went straight from the airport, which is basically at Anuragu, and went straight into the community and went straight to the first target. And the dog went in and sat everywhere. Like the dog indicated that there was cannabis everywhere. And we searched it high and low, and we didn't find a crumb. But the funny thing was, there was a young bloke who came back, young adult, came back towards the crowd that we had there at that particular warrant, and the dog went straight up to him and sat. And we searched him, and there was nothing there. But he'd just taken all the cannabis and taken it out in the bush somewhere, and we're never going to find it. It's
Yeah.
just we're never going to find it. He's hidden it. We're not going to get it. So, and that was the story. I think we seized a gram off someone walking through the street in Aliangula, who the locals pointed out to us. But what it did do, they actually got rid of a lot of their cannabis, and as a result, um, by day two, one of the sergeants at Groot Island was telling me, "Boys, the domestic violence rate's going up. We're starting to get called to more domestics than we normally get, and they get a lot of jobs. Groot Island's a very busy, potentially very dangerous place." Um, I think there was criticism before he was the king. Prince Charles had made a comment, going, "Is it true you people still throw spears at each other?" And everyone called him a racist and all the rest of it. Well, I can show you 4K definition YouTube footage of a full blown spear fight in
Yeah.
Anuragu from basically any recent time you want. But yeah, yes, it's that kind of
There was a
place.
big one. There was a big one, 2014, I think.
There
Correct
was
my
a
memory.
couple where there was one massive one where two people got killed, and the police filmed
Yeah.
it all happening. There was no way. What are you going to do? Intervene? You need bloody two machine guns to intervene in that. Like there were
Yeah.
spears
Yeah.
flying across at these two guys, these two crews. Not guys. There was lots of people involved, but there were obviously main actors, and the main guys involved were throwing full blown shovel nose spears. Shovel nose spears are war spears. They're designed to kill. And that's exactly what happened. There were two people killed by spears in that particular fight. And that was
Yeah.
filmed on a very modern mobile phone and uploaded to YouTube. So, yes, yes, Your Majesty, they, yes, still fight with spears very, very
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's right.
that's the kind of thing that goes on. And the other thing is where you've got to temper that drug enforcement, especially with that lower end cannabis, where yeah, sure. I don't know many. when they're all stoned and everything's going on there, that the harm minimisation has kicked in. And look, the political side of the fact that there's a lot of drug dependent people, that's not for us to comment on. Whatever, people are going to have their opinion on that. But from the pure policing point of view, harm minimisation, when the cannabis was in the community, generally speaking, it was a lot calmer than when it wasn't, because when there was no cannabis in the community, really serious stuff kicked off.
Yeah, that's right. Mate, I'm just going to touch on something there. You said, like, the dog sits and all that sort of thing, especially when it came to cannabis. Just to give, I got a bit of a story for just so that people can understand how good these dogs are. And their sense of smell is phenomenal. This was the time I was actually working in the substance abuse intelligence desk with Kenny Bradshaw. I think that was when you went for your D's course. That was back 2010.
Yeah,
um, and George went with you, so I went in to replace George while he was doing the course. And anyway, we used to do roadblocks out in Arnhem Land, and we pulled this one car over, and the general thing was you would get the people out of the car. They're known drug runners. You get them out of the car. You walk them, and you get them to line up about 15 meters behind the car, 20 meters behind the car, and
yeah,
then you get the drug dog out, and you get the drug dog to run over the people first, or run past them and see if they pick up anything. But then you get it to go into the car. Now, they got one of the drug dogs out. I think it was Archie. We all remember Archie,
mm,
um, and he was like, so going past. He was probably about 10 meters behind the car, and the dog stopped and looked at the car. And anyway, the handler just kept on moving him, moving into the people, and he went across the people, and I think he sat at one of them. Anyway, we searched all them, we didn't find anything. And then he went to the car, went straight to the boot, put him in the boot, sat. There's something in the boot there, and then went around the rest of the car. Now I think it was about $5,000, but it was in a clip seal bag, and it was just money. There was
mm,
no cannabis at all in the car, but it was just cash that had been used at the purchase, or when people would actually purchase the cannabis, and so that dog from 10 meters behind the car, inside a clip seal bag, smelt the cannabis that was residue on money.
yeah. Oh, mate, they're incredible. And the other thing is, they're the friendliest dogs on earth. They're these gorgeous little Labradors. They would not hurt a fly. But the thing is that they're trained in such a way that their favourite toy, which is a rolled up towel that they just love, well, they're trained to associate that with cannabis or whatever, drugs, or lots of drugs. So all they're
Yep,
looking for is their toy. They smell that. They show their handler that that's where their toy is, and they get their toy.
yep,
They would
yep,
not hurt a fly. They barely bark. They are just these beautiful dogs. And my God, they are good, mate. They are so good. And you know what? The other
yep.
thing, working in drug squad with the dog handlers, with those detection dogs, it was just morale raising. You're sitting there and you're
Oh,
doing your paperwork and all the rest of it. And then, either Pete or Timmy had come in with the
yeah,
Labradors, the black or the golden lab.
yeah.
Everyone's
Archie
mood
and Leo.
improved. And they come over and did Archie and Leo. That's right. They're
Yep,
both passed away now. Poor old fellas. Anyway, those
yep.
not the handlers, the dogs, I should say. The dogs had come in. The handlers are very much alive. But yeah,
Yep.
the dogs had come in, and you're not gushy with a working dog. You don't. They're not a pet. They're a working dog, but they still liked a pat, and they were just bloody nice. They were nice to have around. And we were with them
Oh,
all
they
the time,
will.
and they'd raise morale in the office. But mate, their
Oh,
abilities
definitely.
were out of control. They were so good.
It
Yeah,
is.
the only time I ever saw them falter, and it was not, we were all faltering, when we were in that substance abuse intelligence desk. That was a federally funded unit, and we had that drug dog capability. And we were sent. I think the six of us went to Kununurra in WA to help out over there with an operation. We were sworn. We were actually sworn in as WA members to do that job. And anyway, it was hot as the fires of hell. It was 40 odd degrees, humidity through the roof. Kununurra is the hottest place I've ever been. And this is in November, so it was just horrible. And we were working long hours. The detective sergeant there at the time was a hell of a goer, and he wasn't much for social stuff. So we had a few beers at night, absolutely stuffed, and went to bed. Like when I say a few, I mean three, and we went to bed. We were stuffed. So we'd kick off at 6 a.m., do 4 search warrants a day, and I think we were there for 3 or 4 days, and we were just buggered by the end of it. But mate, the dogs about day 2, maybe lunchtime, we were rolling into probably the 6th warrant at that point, or the 7th warrant, and the dogs were just like, "Really? It's so hot. I'm not getting out of this air conditioned car. You can get stuffed." Oh, they just didn't, and they walk around very, very unenthused about what they're up to. And yeah, that so they did suffer from the heat a bit, but they were the most pampered animals I've ever seen. So yeah,
Oh,
anyway,
well, I think it was Archie used to take himself for a walk, didn't he? He used to actually
that
grab
was
his lead.
brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Peter'd have the leash, and then Archie would take the leash in his mouth, just so a bit of a loop from his collar, and he'd take it in his mouth, and he'd walk ahead, and Peter just let the collar go. And yeah, we'd all have a great. Oh, that was so. It was morale raising watching Archie walk around the back of the police station holding his own lead. It was so good.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah,
but I think, and they all had their own personalities too. Because Archie, I think, was scared of heights, so he never liked going up in the top of trucks. Whereas Leo didn't mind that so much.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
they all. Yeah, very
Archie
much.
used to shake when he was at high spaces.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
it was good.
so,
But
yeah,
yeah, mate. Like talking about illicit stuff again. I know what we've talking about. What we've been speaking about is that lower end stuff. So what people will think illicit substances, they think we're chasing heroin, cocaine. Not. Yeah. Okay. Drug and organized crime squad definitely do in the territory, but the biggest you've got to look at the harm minimisation and look at what the problem is for you locally, and that for us was number one was alcohol, number two was cannabis, excuse me, and then very much up there was kava, and my the one drug that really does scare me, um, and when I say drug, a drug type is what we used to call ATS, and ATS is very much a law enforcement term that's amphetamine type substance because there's a bit of a spectrum. So basically, you got your old 1980s Hell's Angels speed, and yeah, everyone knows speed's bad and all the rest of it. MDMA, so your methyl deoxymethamphetamine, that's your old disco bickies. They're not so bad. That the guys on that, they'd cuddle you even when you're arresting them. They'd give you a hug. That was fine. What used to terrify me was ice, meth,
yeah,
pure that ultra purified methamphetamine. Um, that would turn absolute little tiny men into the Incredible Hulk. I know
yeah,
I'm not mentioning anything here that we don't really know, but I don't know what your experience is with it, but I've had a couple of experiences of guys heavily affected by methamphetamine, like pure ice, very pure meth. And
yeah,
my on more than probably I don't know 10 or 15 times we've dealt with guys on this stuff. Caucasian, I might add too. It's not really an issue within the Aboriginal community, and I would say thank Christ it isn't. But
mm,
what we were dealing with, mostly in my city safe days, we dealt with quite a bit of not a lot, but when we did deal with it was in that sort of area. There was one that sticks in my memory. They all pretty memorable, but one that really sticks in my memory was there was four of us, and I'm not a little guy. Like even in the cops, I was 105, 100, between 105 and 110 kilos, and not without a bit of strength. So I could sort of handle myself pretty well. The guys with me weren't much smaller or bigger. There might have been a couple who were bigger than me. We had this guy one night we had a number of 000 calls for this guy just going ballistic in Mitchell Street. We get to him, and for one, he was bloody hard to catch. Secondly, when we actually got hold of him, I'm talking a little guy. He would have been 60, 70 kilos tops. We finally got him, wrestled him to the ground. It was like wrestling wet spaghetti. You just could not get hold of him. Anyway, we got him to the ground just in big dumb grips where you're basically grabbing the whole shoulder blade, wrapping up his entire arm and his shoulder in one big grab. Someone else is grabbing his whole left hip and wrapped around his leg just to get hold of him, just to get him to the ground. We get him face down on the ground and go to put him in that 3 point hole, get his hands behind his back. We could not for the life of us get his hands behind his back. He then did a push up. We put our whole weight on his back to try and restrain him. He did a push up with it would have been 230 kilograms sitting directly on top of him and just pushed us up like he was doing a push up by himself. We eventually, in doing that, he actually damaged a lot of the muscles and tendons around his shoulders. We could hear him popping like this guy was off his head. We got his hands behind his back and finally got some handcuffs on him. Um, We wrangled him, and basically he was just bucking and bucking. It was absolute nightmare to get him to the cage. Got him in the cage. Trying to get the door shut was a nightmare. He just kept trying to spaghetti his way out underneath the door. It was just impossible to handle. We finally got him in the cage, and he was just smashing from side to side like a monkey in a zoo, just going from side to side to side. You just couldn't. The car was rocking from this little guy just going ballistic. We took him up to the hospital. We didn't even take him to custody. He said, "This guy's going to hospital. His heart's going to explode." We got him up there, and basically that he wasn't charged with anything. That was a mental health psychosis medical intervention. That was the only way to deal with it. And then we obviously helped when we got up there. We said, "Look, we need you outside in the ambulance bay now. We're not bringing him into the hospital. You're going to put other people at risk." And I remember we had to get him out of the cage, which is a bloody endeavor in itself. We got him out, got him on the ground, and I think one of the doctors said, "We've injected him with enough midazolam." And look, medical professionals, forgive me, I don't know the way these drugs work, but basically that's the drug used to put people out who are suffering from psychosis. But he said, "We've given him so much, he urgently needs to go straight in there because we need to balance that out with the drug that reverses it." So he had to go straight in, unconscious. They had to manage his level of consciousness with drugs in and out. It was good old methamphetamine. And the whole time I'm thinking, his heart's going to explode. There's going to be a death in custody. Like, this guy is out of control. We can't, there's no way to control him. But he wasn't aggressive. He was just resistant. That's all it was. He wasn't trying
Yeah.
to attack anyone. He just didn't want to be locked up. That's all it was. And I thought, holy shit, that's a drug. That is a hell of a drug. And I mean, there's plenty of other stories, but that one sticks in my mind. So, there's definitely that spectrum.
Oh, yeah, mate, for sure. I've got one story, and this is probably actually what sparked me to say about the drugs in the first place. Is my mum reminded me. Now this goes back to 2016, and like you would know Shannon Harvey quite
Right.
well. I was working with him, and look, to tell you the truth, Shannon and I basically spent the whole year in Borroloola doing weights. We were strong. We were doing handstand push-ups. Like we were solid. Like just I suppose gym junkies to the extent.
Well,
So we were really
you were
strong.
both single at the time, weren't you?
Yes.
You had to have the guns for the girls, mate. Yeah.
um, and so we were incredibly strong, incredibly fit, and like I don't know what Shannon be probably just over 100 kilos. I think I was probably sitting mid 80s
Mm.
at the time, maybe a bit close to 90 because of the muscle mass, and we had to take this guy into the clinic, and he'd been on ice, but you know how they go through those stages and they're kind of reasonably compliant, but they can turn at any time. And this
Oh,
guy was
yeah.
basically going for mental health assessment, and he was fine. And so Shannon and I are kind of really watching him really closely, and we've got him in the emergency area, and they're kind of monitoring him. And then suddenly he just turns. He just gets this idea in his head, and it absolutely went nuts. And like this is a similar sort of scenario. We were wrestling with him for probably a good 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes, and realistically, definitely. Um, and he got to the point where we destroyed the emergency room. He was fighting that much. There was beds turned over, the tail, the curtain rail ripped out of the ceiling. There
Yeah.
was computers smashed, and we were fighting with this guy to the point that I actually had to grab him from behind, and he grabbed Shannon, and I picked him up, and I that's it. I've just got to get him on the ground so we can get on top of him. So we got him onto the ground, and then Shannon, like between us, is probably just over 200 kilos. And this guy, he was the same thing. He wasn't a huge guy. He was skinny. He was tall, but he was skinny. That was it. So I mean, he'd be lucky to be my weight. And he stood up, carrying both of us. He was lying on the ground, and we were trying to get him down. And he actually got up off the ground, lifting both and Shannon and I off the ground.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. I just just remembering back, I can't believe how he actually managed to do that.
No.
And then it was actually quite comical because that fight went on for a long time, and I remember at one stage I'm holding on to him, and he's grabbed. I'm trying to pull him back into the room, and he's grabbed hold of the door, and one of the nurses, M, popped her head around to see what the commotion was because she just walked in. I'm going, "Hey, M, probably not a good time to come in here at the moment." We pulled him back in again. And then, and then he's actually grabbed hold. He grabbed hold of another curtain rail and he's booted Shannon into the wall.
Yeah.
And anyway, and I saw the look in Shannon's eyes, and I go, oh no, this is because we've all got that point where we get pushed, to the limit, and this is 5 minutes of fighting, and lucky we could go for 5 minutes because we were just fit,
Oh, mate,
and
that's massive. Yeah.
yeah, and anyway, I said, Shannon, just taser him. Just
Yeah.
taser him. So Shannon pulled out the taser, and now the funny thing is, it hit him in the leg. So because Shannon could only get it because he was just moving around that much, it was really hard to get a thing. So he shot it, and it got him in the leg. But what really got him in the end, he felt it, and he actually grabbed one of the wires. So then, of course, it went through his whole body,
Yeah. Right.
and oh, he just dropped straight to the ground, and we managed to get him off. So when I actually talk about like, and this is one thing I wanted to mention, when you're talking about ice, taser is probably one of the best options you can use, because
Well,
unless you, sorry mate, unless you hit them with a bullet and it's got to hit something vital, they're just going to keep on coming.
oh, mate, yeah, and you shared an unarmed person. I'd be visiting you.
Yeah.
We'd be doing this podcast from the visitors centre, mate. So, no, it's not an option. And look, I just to put that in context, you got to understand. You're talking about two senior, like relatively experienced, very experienced police officers at this
Yeah.
point. You more so than Shannon, but Shannon's no slouch, mate. I mean, he was very experienced by then.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you guys are very experienced, very strong, very fit. Um, it's the perfect scenario for police turning up. You've got highly experienced guys who can handle themselves and will, and that's what took place in a clinic in a remote community. And for anyone who doesn't know where Borroloola is, Google it. It's 700 kilometres from Catherine, in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere. Catherine is the closest major centre, and it's 700 kilometres away. Basically, it's on the Northern Territory side of the Queensland border, but right up underneath the Gulf of Carpentaria. So, I mean, on the western side of the Gulf of Carpentaria, on the
Yeah.
MacArthur River, it is in the absolute middle of nowhere, and it punches above its weight. Holy bloody hell, we had some jobs
Oh,
out there. So you're
well and
you're in
truly.
the middle of nowhere. There's two there. There's potentially a couple more who can come from the police station, but they're probably in bed. So they're gonna have to get out of
Yeah.
bed, get dressed, get kitted up, get there. They're at least 20 minutes away, and that's if they sprint. So
Yeah.
it's mate, it's full on, and that's the good old methamphetamine, mate. Holy bloody hell!
Oh,
I'll finish off with one very, very quick story, and I'm just going to cover it. But in 2000, June 2019, I was a negotiator. I was off duty at the time. I got a message that there was an active offender in the city in Darwin, and it was Ben Hoffman. For those if you want to Google Ben Hoffman, you'll find out what he did. Basically, it was an active shooter situation in Darwin and in the Darwin city sector. So not in the CBD, but certainly in the sector. So 6 people were shot, 4 were killed, and the offender basically gave up at the end. And the thing that fueled the entire thing was methamphetamine. So, mate, it's a very dangerous drug. I think we've gone from alcohol, which can, cause a few dramas, Kava, which doesn't make people violent, but makes them just they don't care about anything else. The old cannabis, mate, I don't know. If you want to get political, my opinion is cannabis is probably one of those things that probably doesn't need to be illegal. I mean, alcohol's legal, cannabis is legal. Cannabis is not my thing. I'm not interested in cannabis, but um, I don't particularly think it needs to be illegal. It would allow police to focus a lot more on the harder stuff. The higher level drugs. Didn't have a lot to do with heroin, cocaine, anything like that, but we had a lot to do with we had a bit to do with the higher end methamphetamine ice, and that
yeah.
is dangerous. That stuff turns humans into animals. So
Yeah.
that's my
Oh,
thoughts
yeah.
on that.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. I'd like, and just to note on that, you mentioned earlier that we like it, they never really got in the Aboriginal communities. It didn't much. Borroloola was one of those ones that, yes, it was a community, but they used to get quite a few people, especially from Mount Isa and other places and all that sort of thing. It wasn't rampant in there, but I'll just touch on something. When I was out in, especially in Arnhem Land, I spent a lot of time because ice was really starting to get into the system, and
Mm,
we did hear reports that they were trying to lace some of the cannabis and cigarettes with ice to get people hooked on it.
yeah.
And we did a lot of education out in the Aboriginal communities. And
Mm.
one thing I'll give the elders a shout out for, they were excellent in supporting anything we could do to prevent it from getting out there because they
Oh,
knew
mate,
what
they knew it.
they knew.
I remember hearing from that many elders, "Oh, you got to stop that ice. That ice, that's no good. That's the end of us, mob. You got to stop that
Yep,
ice." And we were going,
yep,
"Boys, we got to. Holy shit! If that the bloody ice gets into a community, we are stuffed."
yep,
So no,
yep, definitely.
it's yeah, no, it was scary stuff. I mean, I know we've kind of only skimmed over it. We've just given a couple of examples and stuff, but yeah, mate, man, that scares me. That shit scares me. Uh,
Yeah, definitely. Just the strength, mate. It was like, I'm still astounded the fact that he could do that, and even what you were saying, like the guy actually did a push up with over
he did a
200
push up with
kilos.
200 kilos on his back. You try and do
Yeah.
that. Try and do a push up
Well,
with your body weight plus 200 kilograms. Just
yeah,
incredible.
mate. Even Shannon and I in our best fitness couldn't have done that.
Not a
Like,
chance, mate.
you
Not a
know.
chance. Yeah. Holy bloody hell.
But
Imagine you blokes on ice. That would have been a thing to see. Holy
hey, not now, mate. Not now.
no,
It's
me neither.
things have changed since then.
Yeah. Well, what do you reckon, mate? How's that?
Well, mate, I reckon we wrap it up. But I think that was a pretty good thing about ice, and I believe, mate, you've got something else ready for next week as well.
Yeah, so I wasn't quite sure what to talk about tonight because I've forgotten we were going to mention a few things about drugs, but I just asked my wife before I walked in here to record this, what should we talk about? And she's gone, why don't you talk about prisoner transfers? And I thought, well, that's boring. Why would anyone care about that? But it actually makes a bit of sense because anyone who's not in the police might be interested about the process of how people get from the middle of nowhere into prison. And the fact of the matter is, police do that. Where I live at the moment, I live on the Armidale and Grafton Road for those playing along at home. So between Armidale and Grafton, or Grafton is the prison for this area up here. Every now and then you'll see, and all the New South Wales vehicles have their location markings, so the call sign marked on the bonnet of the vehicle. And the other day was a Tamworth vehicle. And my wife said, why would a Tamworth patrol car be out here? I said, because those guys in that car are on overtime, probably running some prisoners down to Grafton. That's all that is. It's just a prisoner run. So it might be interesting to hear that how this all occurs. But anyway, we might touch on that a bit. And I think the beauty of things like New South Wales, and especially in these areas where things are a bit close, prisoner runs are pretty basic because it's just a car ride from here to here. It might be a couple of 100K, but it's just a car ride. In the Northern Territory, it
Yep,
might be 1,000 kilometres. So
yep,
there's different ways of doing that. There's halfway meets, there's all kinds of things, but we can talk about that next time, mate.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
mate. Yeah, no, there's 100 stories at least.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
And
we did
some
plenty of them.
wild things take place, and we can touch on some wild stuff that's happened on prisoner transfers in the
Yeah,
NT. At
definitely.
10,000 feet and at no feet. It's all
Yep,
wild stuff takes place.
yep.
Uh,
All right, mate. Well, I reckon you want to sign it off, mate?
yeah, mate, that'll do us. That's 200 Cops. Thanks for listening in. We really appreciate it. Get in touch, send us a message, let us know what you want to hear, and we'll talk to you next week. All the best.
Yeah.